You cannot vote, consult, or wish away geologic hazards. You may find that once you start cutting into that hill, that you have to stop, regardless of what we think. So, and I want to briefly go through a few things, because specifically in the code, it requires that the geotechnical engineer, the geologist, has to identify certain things, very specific things that we have in this city. And if you don't talk about them, if you don't acknowledge them, it puts the entire public at risk. So this was a slide that I had early on. I deleted it. But the stop sign means it's not in their report. The things that I'm discussing are not in their report. Next slide, please. So this is an image from their report. This is basically the core sections that run down. They tell you what the dirt is going down into the ground. One of the things they noticed was the groundwater. Well, the groundwater is acknowledged, but something that Chris Rudnick, the professor and geologist of mine, pointed out very astutely is that in this case, the groundwater is in the bedrock. What does it mean when the water's in the bedrock and it's shale that doesn't allow water through it? It means it's cracked. It means it's fractured. It means it's allowing water to intrude. And while CTL Thompson, the report says that there is water present, it neglects to say that that it's in the bedrock and doesn't discuss any of the hazards associated with that fact. The bedrock under this site is the Pierre Shale. The Pierre Shale is hazardous on its own. That is a nationally known fact. There are FEMA papers about that rock. The Pierre Shale is hazardous on its own. It is even more hazardous when there's water in it. And one of the reasons, because of the Colorado Geological Survey's research, one of the reasons is that the Pierre Shale can dissolve instantly in the presence of water. Not that it will, but it can. And so to neglect to mention that water has intruded into a hazardous material known as the Pierre Shale and not discuss it and not offer mitigation factors for this known hazard. In fact, this hazard is requested by the ordinance. There's nothing in there about that. So next slide, please. In this instance, I want to call your attention to their description of the hazards associated with the Pierre Shale. They neglected to include the second half and arguably the most important half of the quote. They say, quote, "The formation has a high potential for shrink, swell, and heaving bedrock problems due to the presence of smectitic claystone and bentonite beds." Period. That's the end of their report. But the entire quote from the actual report where this is taken from ends with the following sentence. "The formation is also prone to slope instability, as landslides have occurred on slopes as shallow as 5 degrees. That was not in their report. That is not mentioned. And I don't understand how the city can make a reasonable decision if they don't have all the data. We don't expect them to be experts in everything, but we do expect the experts that we hire to be forthright about what is in the actual sites. If you don't know it's there, you can't mitigate it. And since it wasn't mentioned, this is certainly not mitigated in their report either. So next slide. Finally, steeply dipping bedrock. This is another called out by the ordinance. I think it's the first or the second hazard called out. What is steeply dipping bedrock? It's a distinct hazard with its own overlay map in the city. John Himmelreich, from the deposition, created that map that is used by all developers in the city to understand what's going on. It's defined as bedrock that dips 30 degrees or more. So what was the report supposed to answer? It was supposed to answer the question, is there steeply dipping bedrock on the site? Instead, the CTL Thompson report provides one sentence that it is not on the overlay map. Well, no one asked them if it was on the map or if it was near the map. They asked if it was on the site. Next slide. Based on their own data, yes, it is. The blue is the bedrock. You don't have to be a geotechnical engineer to see that. The blue is the bedrock, the Pierre Shale, the shale that is known to fail on its own. These slope stability analyses were performed in the topsoil only and not the bedrock, when the bedrock is the hazard here. The geologic maps all show that. That's not controversial. That is a well-known fact. So instead, they provided the one sentence, but the answer is yes. There is steeply dipping bedrock under the site. Thank you.
Yep. I'm sorry, you're out of time.